broadcast. Welcome to the program tonight, Stephen.
My pleasure to be here. I think it's my first time.
It is indeed. Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't we just open this up, and get right to it, Stephen? Give the folks out there a little bit of your background, who you are, and why you started and got involved with the Paradigm Research Group.
Paradigm Research Group was set up in 1996 as a political advocacy organization. The reason it's called that is because the first thing I did was to register as a lobbyist on behalf of some research organizations, thus Paradigm Research Group. But it's really a political activist organization. It was set up to advocate essentially for one thing, and that is what has now come to be called disclosure, capital D, and that's a formal acknowledgement of ET presence by governments, meaning heads of state. And that is its chief goal. That's what we're striving for. And over the last 22 years now, we've done whatever we could to advance that goal, toward that goal, and educate the public to the subject, and so forth. So it's a political movement, and it has a pretty simple outcome, and that is a president of a major nation tells their people the ET's presence is real, and that it's time to deal with it.
Do you find there's a lot of opposition in the political realm on that disclosure?
Opposition is not the word I might use. They won't touch it. It's been made radioactive by the government deliberately. That's the truth embargo, as we like to call it. So that it's just not in anyone's interest to touch this issue, deal with this issue, whether you're a politician or whether you're a member of the media, whether you're an individual, a philanthropist, whatever. And so I've dealt with that, and I understand that. Direct opposition has really fallen off, though. The skeptics, the debunkers, you rarely see them anymore. We're in the final days, I think, of the truth embargo, to be frank. And so I think things are going to get a little smoother as we go forward.
It does seem that a steady flow of information has been coming out on various subjects. For instance, the couple recent videos from, I think, with the Air Force jets were flying. And my question, have you seen those videos?
Oh, yes, of course.
Okay, is there any way you can walk me back and tell me how something like that would even come out? Were these videos at the Department of Defense? Were they in the Air Force archives? Who had them and who released them?
This is a long story. If we've got the time, I'll tell you. Essentially, there has been a major development on this issue. Most people would not recognize this. In other words, the vast public is simply not going to recognize how important this is. Those that have been following the issue, like myself, do recognize how important it is and know that in time, well, some big things are coming. And what happened in history? History often arrives in funny packages. It's not simple and straightforward. History sometimes happens in ways you just can't imagine, but it happens. In this case, in 2015, essentially 68 years after Roswell, 68 years into the truth embargo, 22 years after the Cold War was ended, or 21 years, 25 rather, a fellow by the name of Tom DeLonge connected up with some people inside the military intelligence complex. That story is complicated, but I can boil it down to this. Tom DeLonge is a 42 going on 32-year-old guy. He's a millennial, really. He had intelligent, successful parents, but he wasn't very good in school, couldn't keep still. Said he skateboarded through his entire kindergarten, K through 12 education. Got out of high school, didn't go to college, but he played the guitar. And I wish I had played the guitar better, to be honest with you. He had formed a couple of bands. After he got out of high school, he formed a couple more. But then he formed Blink 182. And then he proceeded to navigate through the very treacherous music industry and to successfully produce, tour, and sell 15 million records. That band took a hiatus. He started another band called Angels and Airways, and that band sold 15 million records, thus making him a wealthy man. But after he left school, he also became an autodidact. The irony is the fellow that couldn't sit still in school suddenly started reading voraciously. And his interest was UFOs, as they were called then. I don't call it that now. I call it extraterrestrial phenomena. He's probably read more books on the subject than I have. And he's been following the issue and addressing the issue in various ways over the last 20-some years, going back to the early 90s. And he reemerged in 2015 with a plan. He had the idea that the U.S. government is getting a bad rap on this, that they're viewed as the bad guys and girls, and they need to get out in front of the issue. They need to also do a little PR. And he was the kind of person that could get the message out to the general public and to the millennials and so forth, because he was a beloved musician, and no question about it, known around the world. Now, first you got to get in touch with these people. Now, he had money. He could go anywhere he wants. So if there was a gathering or something, or some convention or something where some big shots might show up, he could simply fly in, sign up, and so forth. And so he'd been poking away at the military intelligence complex for a while. And then all of a sudden, they reached out to him more directly and invited him to some events, and then some meetings were held, and so forth, until lo and behold, this now early 40s musician was involved in a coordinated effort being directed from the inside of the military intelligence complex to address this issue. And the reason it happened ultimately is that DeLonge's idea actually married up with the needs of many insiders on this issue. Meaning that we've always known that inside the military, inside the Department of Defense and the CIA and so forth, were plenty of people that knew the extraterrestrial presence was real. And whether or not they ever intended to say that or speak to it, apparently a number of them wanted to see disclosure. And more importantly, they began to realize that disclosure was getting close, and that if they didn't get out in front of the issue, they were going to take all of the heat, and the politicians were going to get all the glory. And so that idea married up with what Tom wanted to do, and they came together throughout 2015 into 2016 to formulate a project based on these ideas. It was all happening in the background. I didn't know about it. Tom DeLonge first announced that something big was coming and that this was going to take place. He first announced he was talking to people inside the DOD, inside the CIA, inside NASA, in an interview given to George Knapp on Coast to Coast on March 27th of 2016. And that the first effort to sort of bring information out, in this case the form of a fiction book based on nonfiction, based on real ideas, was going to happen in April, next month, called Secret Machines. I was skeptical, but a month later that book came out. It confirmed what he had said to George Knapp. He'd been talking with insiders, he'd had meetings at the Pentagon, meetings with the CIA people, and that he had a 10-person advisory team assigned to him to provide information to sort of help this process along. And that is how it began. Announced March 31st, 2016. The next major development probably was supposed to happen in, I think, December of 2016. I think that was generally the plan. But history intervened. First of all, Tom's interaction with the Democratic Party, particularly John Podesta, got exposed by WikiLeaks in the 50-some thousand emails that were dumped out prior to the election. And Tom DeLonge was all over those emails, and I have them all on my website, the ones that deal with the ET issue. And that wasn't supposed to happen. And then the person that they had expected to win the election did not win. And so they went silent and had to reconfigure and rethink this plan that they'd spent 15 months putting together before they announced it. It took another 10 months. And finally, on October the 11th, they announced the project with the rather awkward name of To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, which included a 10-person team, all former members of the military intelligence complex, DOD, CIA, Lockheed Skunk Works, NASA, and so forth, right? Almost all of them scientists, most of them PhDs. And that this project was going to start bringing information out. It was going to start exploring some of the areas relative to the ET issue, including antigravitic drive and a whole bunch of other things. They announced a public service corporation, a public benefit corporation rather, and immediately invited people to purchase shares, which they did to the tune of about $2.5 million in the first round within a couple of months. And that was announced in a low-key Facebook video, no press release, no press present, and got the ball rolling. That was October 11th. What you're referring to is what happened next. Naturally, we're waiting for the next shoe to drop, and which would help to confirm that this was no flash in the pan. This was no trivial thing. The website was powerful. The team members had extraordinary biographies, which anybody can see by going to the tothestars.com or .org. And what happened next was a big deal. In the interim 2 months, what they did was they delivered a news story to the New York Times. And they delivered the story to them, which is nothing unusual about that at all. I believe they used Leslie Kean as the conduit for this. And they presented this story to the New York Times, which was obviously based upon their project and what they were doing. It was up to the New York Times whether they were going to write about it or not. And they could have easily chosen not to. But what they did was to, assign one of their reporters, Helene Cooper. They allowed Leslie Kean to be part of the reportage. And then just to add a little gravitas, they put Pulitzer Prize-winning Ralph Blumenthal on the article. And they didn't just publish one article, they published two. And these articles came out December the 16th, 2017. And this will be viewed as an historical day. And those articles will be viewed as historical articles. Because what came out was more of the background, but some extraordinary background to the people involved and to the project. They announced, one, that in fact, the Pentagon, reluctantly, I'm sure, agreed to initiate a study of, quote, UFOs at the behest of Majority Leader Harry Reid, who was Majority Leader at the time. And Harry was going to provide the money from earmarks in the Senate budget. No, as his role as Majority Leader, he had that ability. He had a couple senators on his side, and they quietly earmarked $22 million, so the Pentagon is not having to put the money up. Did the Pentagon want to do this? No. For one thing, the military intelligence complex at the appropriate levels has been studying the ET issue 24/7, 365 days a year since 1947, if not sooner, without let up. But it's all black programs. Mm-hmm. Harry Reid wanted a program. It wasn't going to be a USAP, an unacknowledged special access program, and they couldn't deny him. So they set the program up. He provided the money, and it ran formally for 5 years, from 2007 to 2012, and they announced who ran that program, and it was Luis Elizondo, who was one of the team, one of the To the Stars team. That was big. The fact that Harry Reid was involved was big, but then they announced that the The reason that Reed approached the Pentagon on this was because he was urged by Robert Bigelow, aerospace billionaire, has been working in contractor relationship with NASA since 2000, and very much on this issue. In fact, just a few months before that article, I think it was May, that article was printed in the New York Times in roughly May of 2017, is when Bigelow was interviewed by CBS, 60 Minutes, on the occasion of his space habitat, which is his principal project, being tested for the first time at the space station. A big deal. They took a tour of his facilities in Las Vegas, and they talked about his projects, and then they naturally asked him about his interest in the UFO subject, which was known to the public, at which time he told the 60 Minutes reporter, there are extraterrestrials here now. And when asked if he thought that people would think he was crazy, I'm paraphrasing, he said, I don't give a damn. And then he was asked again and confirmed there's extraterrestrials now. And that was in May. And then when the December article comes out, it's announced that he was the one that prompted Reed to go to the Pentagon. And now that was big news right there, but they weren't done. Because what was also announced in that article online, well, in the print article, but in line, of course, they have video, they have links and what have you, is that when Elizondo left the DOD job he had, which had included running that program, he had authorization to take, which obviously had been declassified, 3 gun camera footage videos with him when he left to become part of the To the Stars Academy team. Well, if you're me, you know how important that is. If you're just a regular citizen, you may be going, oh, okay, fine, he got some videos. Oh, no, 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 no. In the 70-year history of this issue, let's just go back to 1947. In all of those 70 years, not a single country with an air force, a decent air force, and that's quite a few countries, who have been recording intercepts with UAPs probably thousands and thousands of times, where planes go up to chase these things, and then they film them, or they pick them on radar, or they get them on FLIR, whatever, infrared. Not a single second of that footage has ever been formally released to the public, nor is available through FOIA, because to release the footage of those intercepts would have ended the truth embargo. And so it was simply not going to come out. My understanding is that one of the videos that Elizondo brought forward, which was the Nimitz video, infrared of the intercept near San Diego in the Pacific, had inappropriately, unauthorized, been given a bit of it to a documentary team, maybe all the way back in 2007. This doesn't count, right? It wasn't authorized. It had no splash. And so they released the first gun camera footage ever. This is a major milestone. And the fact that it was declassified is a milestone. The fact that he was allowed to leave with it is a milestone. And it confirmed that there is a substantial group within the military intelligence complex right now that within the law, without violating their oaths, without violating classification, they're prepared to start releasing information that will clearly advance the disclosure process. And they followed up that video with 2 more gun camera footage videos, which are available on the internet and have been seen all around the world. And to reinforce that, the second article published by the New York Times on December the 16th was an interview with the pilot that was in the plane that took the gun camera footage of the Nimitz object, which, according to Christopher Mellon, in his announcement on October 11th, shot up to 80,000 feet and then came straight down and hovered over the ocean. And I'm pretty sure that the Russians don't have anything that could do that. And so that gives you a background and perspective of how significant this is, and it's only just beginning.
Well, I thought it was a very interesting sort of soft disclosure right there. I'm thinking, well, why in the world are they allowing this out? Obviously, maybe they feel like the civilian population has been prepped enough for whatever slow walking of released documents they've been doing. Numbers of questions have been coming in while you're talking there, Stephen Bassett. Let's get to a couple of them real quick here. This is from one of our chats. It says, are our leaders working with the ETs?
We don't know. You hear rumors. People come forward and say, "Oh yeah, I know this," unnamed source, that kind of thing. It is. I do not see the evidence for it, and I'm certainly not persuaded that that is the case. And so, without that, I have to say, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. Just a quick comment from Gordon, Calgary, Alberta, says, thank you for coming on the program, Stephen. So we appreciate his comment as well. This is from Doug White. He's asked the question, I'm not sure how to really, I'm just throwing it out there. Why do they treat us like mushrooms? I don't know. I don't feel like a mushroom, but but
He's saying that, don't you?
Huh?
You know how mushrooms are, or at least in the not natural, but how mushrooms are cultivated, right?
Okay,
they have to put them in the dark,
right?
And they have to cover them with manure.
That's
why he's saying that.
Okay,
keep us in the dark and dump BS on us.
Okay.
This is a somewhat crass way of saying that the United States government made a not necessarily the wrong decision in the late 1940s, early 1950s, that, given the circumstances at the time, formally acknowledging the extraterrestrial presence was simply not in the interest of national security. And I'm not saying I wouldn't have said the same thing. I would have liked to have seen it. I would have liked to have seen it told right then. I believe it would have changed history. It would have changed the 20th century dramatically if we'd been told about the ET presence in 1947, which we almost did learn because of what happened at Roswell. But, that's 20/20 hindsight. And the decision was primarily old Cold War stuff. The president, both Truman and Eisenhower, as well as their top people, as well as the Pentagon, the military, and so forth, at that time, that period from 1947 to 1953, as far as they were concerned, history was about to do what it does, and that is the last war was going to create the next war, and the next war was going to be a nuclear war. And they pretty much knew how bad that was going to be. And so for them, the situation was existential. It wasn't just like, oh, we got a little thing going with the Soviet Union, we'll work it out. No, not at all. And so they decided, we don't know what these ETs want. We don't know what this technology that we've gotten from their vehicles can do. We don't know a million things. And until we know a lot more, this is going to be classified at the highest level. Mm-hmm. And see what happens. Maybe in 10 years, the Soviet Union and the United States will all be buddies.
Mm-hmm. In ET lore, they've been associated with crop circles, cattle mutilations, abductions. Has there been any case where the ETs have actually attacked any military force on the Earth?
No. I am no such case. However, we have ample evidence. It's one of the most important evidentiary baskets we've got. I mean, it's just incredibly significant, and the press should be all over it, but whatever. There has been numerous instances where they're tampering with our nuclear weapons. They turn them off frequently, and may still be doing that, or at least in the relatively recent past. There's evidence they did it in the Soviet Union. Now, some would call that an attack, and some would call it a message. But we turn them back on, and we continue. Mm-hmm. So the answer to that question is no. Now, but I will have, there's one caveat. I recommend a book called I think it's The Air Wars of the 1940s. Anyway, it's Frank Fushino. Mm-hmm. And his research seemed to indicate that in the early days, we were trying to shoot them down. And we may have shot one or two down. which could have accounted for some of the crashes that took place. But as it happened, all of a sudden, planes, human planes, started falling out of the sky a little higher than probability would predict. And this went on for a while until we stopped shooting at them. Mm-hmm. This is important research. If it's true, it has a significant exopolitical message. That is that under certain circumstances, they will kill human beings. But they stopped when we stopped, which is kind of a human kind of thing, right? But that is his research. I recommend people check it out. I have a feeling he's probably right, but more work can be done there to really pin that down.
Let me ask something. Stephen Bassett, Executive Director of Paradigm Research Group. Did Hiroshima and Nagasaki get their attention, and that's, say, a couple of years later, why we had a Roswell event? And did it get their attention to where they decided that they need to pay more attention to our capabilities?
Yes, I think that the consensus continues to build amongst the knowledgeable researchers on this subject. And it's a consensus, man, prove it. Mm-hmm. I feel very strongly about it. That one, extraterrestrials of one civilization or another have been hanging out, passing through, watching us for as long as you want to go back in time. Which is exactly what we would do. In other words, if our telescopes, which are getting better and better, particularly our space telescopes, were to actually identify planets out there that had life, I mean, we knew they had life. Every one of those would be on a very important list, and we would be watching them. And over the years, if we developed interstellar drive, we would go visit them, and we would be paying attention to them for as long as we were around. So this is common sense.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you can, let me ask you.
But I'll finish the point.
Okay.
That said, in 1945, when we tested the first atomic bomb, we crossed a very important threshold, which they knew was coming. I mean, they would have known that we had our atomic research in the early 1900s. They would have known pretty much when this was coming. That we would be able to make such bombs. Doesn't mean we would, but because it doesn't follow that when we cracked open the atom and started to understand nuclear fission and so forth, that we were going to make a bunch of bombs. We could have had a different situation globally where we go, oh, we want to do that. Let's make power plants. Let's study it some more. But no, we did make them, and we tested them, and more importantly, we dropped them on human beings. And that was in August of 1945, and it was only, about 18 months later that all of a sudden sightings started being reported all around the world, early 1947. Mm-hmm. I believe that was an expansion of their whole operation here changed, their agenda changed, and they moved into a new phase that starts in early 1947 with a plan that was absolutely triggered by the use of those atomic bombs.
And I've read a few cases where it seems that somebody turned the power off, of course, to the nukes. But let me ask you: we're dealing with this North Korean situation here. It nearly got to an escalated point, and then Kim Jong-un may be backing off somewhat. Do you think that the aliens or ETs pay attention to these sort of global back and forth tauntings and challenges, and do they interfere with those in any way?
I'm pretty sure they pay attention. It's possible they may have turned off a nuke or have tampered with a North Korean nuke. But if they did, we would never know. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're not going to know that. Mm-hmm. But it wouldn't shock me to learn one day that they did. But are they pay attention? I'm certain they're paying attention.
All right, this question is from Azure, and we have multiple chats going on our YouTube channel and on our web page as well. This is from YouTube chat. Do you think that any of the ETs themselves are of any supernatural or demonic source?
Well, I don't think that ETs are supernatural or paranormal. There is nothing paranormal about ETs. They are absolutely normal. In fact, if they weren't there, that would be paranormal. This is a big universe, and as we've recently found out, though I knew it when I was 10 years old, this galaxy alone is filled with billions of planets. And biospheres are not uncommon. They are all through the galaxy. And we're not unique. We're not alone. This is just not a big deal. So it's totally normal. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As far as demonic, well, when you get to that, you're into religious beliefs. And I'm not a religious person. I'm science. I view this from a scientific point of view. Now, I'm also politics. And, you know, politics isn't very sciencey, as you can imagine. But it is, it's you know, they do call it political science, so how the hell they do that, I don't know. But, you know, politics and science do exist in the same world, and they do have to interact. So I'm involved in both. So the demonic thing means nothing to me. I really can't even speak to it. However, let's face it. Not everybody can be a physicist. Not everybody's going to get degrees in astronomy and cosmology. You got people out there that live in their lives. They have belief systems that get them through the day, and religion is a major component of that. And so consequently, huge numbers of people are going to view the ET situation through the religious prism. Okay, fine. But here's where the government's screwing up. By not giving us the truth. We should have gotten the truth on this after the Cold War ended in '91. By not giving us the truth, they are they're leaving people no other choice but to try to think of it the best way they can. Obviously, I think if we knew the truth of this and the government came out with what they know and the research was given the proper due, I think most people that are leaning that way would probably say no, they're not demons. Just like, you know, I mean, you know, there are many races on this planet, and there are some people that think people of another race are demonic, whatever. The truth is what we need. And the truth can exist in a religious world. It can exist in a spiritual world. But it has to be, an effort has to be made to be clear about what we know scientifically and what is known spiritually, and not get the two confused. You don't put space rockets together to go to the moon based upon the Old Testament. It's on science. And so again, I'm respectful of people that have a religious take on this, but for me, I have to stick with a scientific path, and hopefully we'll learn what we need to know that way.
Well, I think history does show that some part of religions long ago did start to push mankind toward scientific analysis. There has been some push for truth that way. But let me ask you, just continue out just a little bit. Do you think that in any way that religious people in general have been holding back this sort of the disclosure? They don't want a disclosure?
I would say no. I know that the government has used this idea, that they have pushed out this meme that if people were told the truth about the ETs, religion would collapse, industry would collapse, people would go crazy, rip off their clothes, run naked in the street. Okay. That's nonsense. Religion is going to be just fine post-disclosure. Mm-hmm. So, but the government's using these concepts and pushing them out to help control the people in government. In other words, you've got thousands of people in our government, various places, that know the ET presence is real one way or the other. And you don't want them, you know, walking on down to the newspaper and chatting it up. You want them to stay in line. And so they're trying to give them reasons why, don't do anything here, because, boy, civilization will fall apart. And so religion has gotten a bit of a bad rap because of that propaganda. People are sort of thinking, oh, yeah, it's those evangelicals. They've definitely been holding it back. They're pushing the government not to do this. No, they're not. There are some people of religious faith, particularly very fundamental faith, who will struggle with the truth of this a little more than others. But, religion has been struggling with some powerful scientific truths for thousands of years. The invention of weapon upon weapon upon weapon, biological, genetics, all of this stuff, it's still around. And it will still be around after they learn the ET presence is true.
I thought the movie Contact did a good job of sort of handling this question. Now, remember the one part where Jodie Foster's character was being interrogated, and they asked her, did she believe in God? And she said, well, I don't believe there's empirical evidence either way. And they go, well, 95% of the planet believes in God in one form or another. Could they all possibly be suffering from the same delusion? So she has some struggles with ET contact and reaching out and using her scientific mind, and she had to struggle with basic sort of spiritual, maybe even unanswerable questions.
It was a great movie. And by the way, a lot of that was written by really Ann Druyan, his wife, which is why that movie is, got a lead feminine character. That was actually a trick question. Or I don't. Let me put it this way. I don't know the wording, but let me respond to your comment. It would be inappropriate for anyone to say that, well, 90% of the people in the world are suffering from the same delusion. First of all, suffering. Don't like that. Delusion, I definitely don't like that. 90% of the people in the world, whatever it is, have a religious, what we call a religious / spiritual / faith based component to their worldview. And when you say it that way, it doesn't sound so awful, does it?
No, it's a kinder, gentler way.
Absolutely. And again, what does one expect? For most of the human history as Homo sapiens sapiens, which is around 300,000 years, human beings, just as smart as you and I, though living in rather less, how would you say, comfortable circumstances, knew nothing about science. Virtually nothing. And they had to deal with that. They had to deal with this world that they were in for 290,000 years. They had to deal with this world. They didn't have encyclopedias. They didn't have science textbooks. They didn't have anything but, their brain, their mouth, word of mouth, passing information, all that. Okay, then civilization begins, and let's face it, it definitely, we started to see a significant advancement of civilization and some knowledge base, but it wasn't exactly, warp speed. So you got a period of time, you got more people, you got civilization, human suffering is getting worse because there's just more people to suffer. Do they have all the science? No, they don't have the science. And so they're coping with the reality of their world. And what we have learned is that a belief in a higher power, a belief in, or having faith, just fundamental concept of faith, was critical in people being able to deal with this difficult, awful world. I'm not going to criticize them for that. As science continues to grow and learn more and more and more, what we found is that certain religious concepts or religious items weren't really necessarily valid. That turns out, no, that's not what it was. Science has shown it was this. Okay, fine. And so science and religion have been now for quite a while advancing forward together and trying to find a comfortable symbiosis. And there are very sharp people out there that can speak very intelligently about this symbiosis. But once again, the vast majority of people did not, get masters or PhDs in comparative religion or theology from Harvard. The basic people are dealing with the basic life. And we don't have a science religion. We don't have the ability right now to raise people from the day they're born with a complete scientific perspective and education so that they can approach everything in their life, the good, the bad, and the ugly, with very clear scientific approach. We can't do that. We're not even close to doing that. And so consequently, religion is extremely important in people dealing with this world. And so when she was asked that question, the answer should have been, this is the way I approach this. I don't know how to approach it the other way. I respect other people's views, and I respect their worldview, right? And if we'll just continue to pursue the truth, and if we will not hide, if we will not classify, if we will not play games and false flags and everything else with the public, the truth ultimately will work out the best for us all. But what happens? It's not religion that's interfering with this truth process. It has always been the U.S. government that is interfering.
Okay.
Not for religious reasons, for political reasons.
All right, Stephen, we're right at the top of the hour. We take a 5-minute break. I've got your website in our background. What can people find on that website?
A lot. By the way, I love the way that you have all these great graphics coming up full screen behind you. It's really cool. The Paradigm Research Group it's just been remodeled. It's got a tremendous amount of material. You can spend weeks on it. It has all my contact information. It has a blog. It has a huge print archive of nearly 10,000 articles, mainstream print articles on this issue, and so forth and so forth. So I encourage people to go to paradigmresearchgroup.org and enjoy. And subscribe to my email list there if they wish.
Okay. All right, we're going to take you out of the picture, and we'll be back with you in about 5 to 6 minutes. Stephen Bassett of the Paradigm Research Group. Stephen, welcome back.
Great to be back.
Well, I'll tell you what, numbers of questions have come in, and there's always just basic questions such as, what do they want? Are they here to help? Are they hurt? Are these generalized questions always going to remain in the realm of roundtable discussion? Or are they ever going to come up with a cohesive strategy that the world's minds, those that have been following the ET story and things, come to a general consensus of what they want?
These are the key questions, and there are 10 or 20 top exopolitical questions that are in play. And the truth of the matter is that the government has prevented us from being able to come to a cohesive understanding of this. The government has undermined research. They put out disinformation, misinformation. They've prevented funding, which help to prevent funding of the researchers, so they're very limited how far they can go, what they can do and accomplish. And that's by intent. And for that reason, we have to speculate on the ET agenda and their intentions and their plan and what have you. I call it making a model. And so I have built a model that I work out of that is based on what we know. I connect the dots that are there, knowing there are plenty of dots that are not there that should be. And I work from that, and I change it as needed. And that's about the best we can do. But there are people out there who want a definitive answer. Why are they here? And I can't give them that. I can tell them some things. I can give them some ideas, speculate. But the government probably knows why they're here. If there's been any direct interaction between ETs and the government, they most certainly know. However, we also know that there are plenty of contactees that work in government, work in the CIA, contactees in the DoD, and so forth. So exactly what the government knows about the ET agenda, very interesting. I hope one day to find out. Some claim that they may know more than what we know, but I doubt that, because the government's got a lot of money to work with, a lot of fancy technology, and I have a feeling that they know more than we do.
We generally work out of 4 dimensions: sight, sound, taste, smell, these types of things, sixth sense, the senses, but we also, height, width, depth. I mean, we kind of have these sort of this paradigm that's got us in this area. But wouldn't it be logical that they're operating on many other levels, and therefore to fully understand what the situation really is, we would never know unless it's revealed to us?
Logical? Well, the nature of Occam's razor is that you start with the simplest explanation, which generally is the most logical explanation. And you don't go to the less logical explanations unless you're taken there by new information and evidence. I see no reason at this point why they have to operate outside of our 3 dimensions plus time. I don't see that. And so as far as I'm concerned, until I learn otherwise, they're operating in the same dimensions that we are. Now, they have advanced science that not surprisingly looks pretty wild and almost like magic. And some people, as they learn about some of the things ETs can do, speculate that they're using other dimensions. It's not an unreasonable speculation, but it's a huge leap. Let me tell you, this idea, the general public throws around this idea that extra dimensions very casually. Like, oh, yeah, sure, that's what the science has shown that. No, it hasn't. And the idea of extra dimensions is a non-trivial matter. And we have a long way to go before we get some hard stuff on that. If the ETs do have the ability to access other dimensions, then probably we'll learn about that if we have open contact with them. We might find out then. But right now, I go with Occam's razor.
Question from the YouTube chat. Do you have a Dateline historical source on the timeline of Earth's history?
What was the first word? Do I have a dateline? I didn't catch that.
Yeah. Do you have a Dateline historical source on the timeline of Earth's history?
What I know about Earth's history is what's in the books. I don't get channeled material. I've got nothing coming in from outer realms.
Kind of glad you don't, really.
Yeah. So now there are plenty of people that claim to have very special information about the entire Earth's history, and that's fine. But I just the basic history we know right now is enough to keep me busy.
I know, Stephen. I had some of those folks on the show. So,
yeah.
but you mentioned in the first hour, you said that it's your belief that they have been visiting probably as far back as recorded history. Is that right?
And before recorded history, logic says absolutely. And again, once you get past the idea that life in the universe is not incredibly rare, but in fact standard. Once you get past the idea that intelligent life developing in another biosphere is exactly what you would expect, right? And that such biospheres have been exist in the galaxy, and then factor in how old the galaxy is, you realize that you're talking countless biospheres may have developed civilizations, starfaring and everything else, and then disappeared many times. So there have been these civilizations around going back a couple billion years. Now, again, Occam's razor. If we were a sentient species, if we had starships, would we go check out other biospheres? You bet we would. As many as we could find. Would we keep tabs on them? You bet we would. And so I have no reason to think that other starfaring civilizations wouldn't do the same. And the nature and what we know about the universe, they've been around forever. Therefore, they've been engaging us. Now, if we were in some incredibly remote part of the universe galaxy, hidden by huge clouds of gas or something, nobody knew where we were, it's possible. But we're quite apparent. Quite obvious.
All right, this question is from our Fast Blast email client from John in Pennsylvania. It says, we were talking about earlier and about political issues, and he asked, could these same political people that are denying us the information, the disclosure, also be keeping us from the truth of overpopulation?
Well, there's the overpopulation is pretty much well known. Some people say we're not overpopulated, but plenty of people do, and there's a huge amount of material on it. The government has the ability to do extensive studies on things like that, world conditions and what have you, and these studies have been released. There have been studies released by the DoD, by the CIA. There was a study at the turn of the century called, something 2025, I forget what it was. And if you read these things, it's not good. And in the words of our own DoD and our own CIA and our own organizations, the situation is potentially incredibly grave. Nobody reads them, of course. The press doesn't make a big deal out of it because, well, that's just not good for ratings. I mean, you don't want to depress people. So is the government withholding from us the real understanding of what we're facing as a planet and a species? Yeah, they are. Is it like in deep, dark programs? Well, some of the work they may be doing related to these challenges may be black ops programs, which is, I think, a mistake. But mostly it's like we just don't talk about it. We'll put out a report. We know nobody's going to read it. We're not going to make a big deal out of it. We're not going to really try to educate the public. But they put out the occasional documentary, a little turn up and a little something there. I call them Easter eggs. It's kind of like they can always say later on, well, we told you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There are two documentaries that came out a number of years ago in the 90s. They came out kind of close to each other. And they were huge red flags. And they had government people in them. One of them was called The Day After Disaster, which is a documentary about what it would be like if Washington, D.C. was blown up by an atomic bomb. And the other was called Countdown to Zero, fundamentally about the fact that we don't have the control of these nuclear materials and weapons that we think we do. These two documentaries are incredibly scary. And they ran a couple times on history, and then you don't see them, and then every once in a while they'll pop up. You can find them on the net. This is what I call limited hangouts, where they kind of put a little something out there. But really engaging us as a population about the real truths of the world and what we face and what's going on, no. We don't. They don't think we have a right to know. They don't think we can handle a lot of these things. They love the secrecy. It makes our life easier. It's become addictive. And it will bring down this republic if we don't reform it. And it will leave us open to enormous pain and suffering down the line. Mm-hmm. You could walk up. I ask you, if you get a chance and you're out in the public or you're at a party, walk up to 100 people over a period of time and simply ask them, what do you know about a potential coming water crisis in the world? Or the potential for wars over water. Do you know anything about that? And you'll find out that almost none of them do. But if you want to stay up late at night and not be able to go to sleep, go study up on that. Because you know what happens when we're a little short of oil. Uh-huh. The Japanese got a little short of oil once because they were being embargoed by the West. There was a lot of stuff going on over there in Asia anyway. And they said, we can't put up with that. And they bombed Pearl Harbor. And there's been other wars over oil. Well, let me tell you, if you think human beings will go to war over oil, you haven't seen anything yet when they don't have enough water. And that's where we're heading. That is one of many things that we're just not allowed to get kind of close to because the government treats us like children. And they're the parents. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
or like
we only need to know what they want us to know. We need to keep our mouth shut. And that is got to change.
No, that really upsets me. That right there. You mentioned the first hour, the FISA, the Freedom of Information Act. I would like to know what the percentage of Freedom of Information Act requests are actually granted, because it seems to me I keep hearing they're just not, and if they do grant you something, it's so redacted you can't make any sense out of it. So
it's an interesting question. I don't know if anybody's actually compiled that. I'm not sure they could compile it because there's various levels of refusal. There's an absolute, we got nothing. There's a, we got something, we can't really. But I doubt if they've done that. But the Freedom of Information Act is interesting. It's a good thing. Glad we have it. And millions and millions of documents have been gotten through it. Okay, fine. But fundamentally, if they don't want you to have a document, you're not going to get it. No. If they don't want you to know a document even exists, you're not going to be told. The national security priority reigns supreme there. But what's happened, and this is cool, is that so many people have filed so many hundreds and hundreds of thousands of FOIAs, and it's a big deal and it's a lot of work. Things slip through the cracks. And the number one thing that has been FOIA'd in the history of the Freedom of Information Act, you know what that is, don't you?
And disclosure?
UFOs. UFOs. And so stuff slips through, and we've gotten some documents here and there. But again, as I told you, you could file Freedom of Information, at least up until December 16th last year, you could file Freedom of Information Act requests every single day on the gun camera footage from intercepts of UAPs, and you will get nothing. And that's true here, true in France, true in the UK, true in every one of the countries with air forces. Because that is the kind of information that just literally blows the truth embargo out of the water. And so the FOIA is a two-edged sword. It is a way for the government to, one, make you feel like you've got access when really on a lot of key stuff you don't. On the other hand, it has been a source of information of great value. And so that's how I see it.
Did you suggest in the first hour we were talking about John Podesta? Would we have had disclosure if Hillary had won?
It is my belief that we'd have already had disclosure by now if Clinton won. Yes.
Was there anything in the 8 years of Obama's administration of moving toward disclosure? What was the history in that section of time?
Oh, that's a very complicated story, Dan. I'm going to eventually make a documentary about all that called Disclosure. Right? We've got it. We've got a teaser up on it now at the website. We've got a site called disclosure.film, and we started early crowdfunding, but we're kind of slowing things down. We're not going to press too hard on it right now because the political situation is so chaotic. And what's going on now is leaving no oxygen. It's like running into a 50-mile-an-hour wind. So we're going to wait until after the election. But I know the whole story going all the way back to 93 and forward. Bill Clinton had a chance to be the disclosure president. He was shut down. I think the Clinton team made a decision that one day they were going to get that legacy that was denied him in 93 in his first term. But first they had to get back in office. And Al Gore would have been the first chance for one of the Clinton people to get back in office, but he lost that election. 8 years go by. Finally, a Democrat gets in office, and the disclosure situation had advanced quite far. And so I think the Clinton people probably thought there was a possibility it was all going to happen during the Obama administration. And they wanted to be part of that. And that's one of the reasons there was a lot of kissing and making up that was going on there. Even though there was, the Clintons and the Obama team were not happy with each other. As that election came about, there was some bad blood. I believe they informed Obama. At some point, Obama was tipped off that, wow, there's a major thing here, and we need to let you know about it. And so, not surprisingly, right away, Obama brought John Podesta in as his transition co-chairman to pick the new government. They picked Hillary Clinton to be Secretary of State. They picked Leon Panetta to be Secretary of Defense. They tried to get Bill Richardson in as Secretary of Commerce. All of these people go back to the Rockefeller Initiative of 93 to 96. And so now they're in there with him. And it's possible they might have thought, okay, we're going to do disclosure under Obama, but we're all going to get part of the glory here. We're going to get this. And because the activist movement was making progress, we were putting pressure all the time. We didn't go away. But it didn't work out that way because, one, the Republicans basically play hardball, and they decided on a scorched earth policy. And so before even the election, they started a process to basically strip mine the money out of the government. I mean, just take all the money out of the government and hand it over to the financial sector in order to, quote, solve the financial crisis that the financial sector had created. And billions upon billions, hundreds of billions of dollars went in the pockets of banks, paid off their debts and what have you, and left us in an extreme crisis, no money in the government. And that's what Obama faced as he arrives in Washington as the first black man black president. No major connections in Washington, D.C., no power centers backing him, a Republican Party dedicated to blocking him completely. And so it was just hell for several years. And so this idea of advancing the disclosure thing during the Obama administration never got off the ground. And it stayed that way. I mean, his administration was a tough slog. And so as the years go by, the Clintons began to realize, okay, probably not going to have disclosure under Obama, but I'm going to be president in 2016. I'm going to be elected in 2016. And they started to prepare for that. And statements were made. There's a whole record of things they were saying as they tried to play the game carefully. And when the election came, PRG, my organization, was all over it. And I literally rained reporters down on them and helped generate 400 articles about the ET issue during their campaign. And they did the best they can to work with that without, having things, pop, because Obama was still president and they wanted it themselves. But by the time the election arrived, the reporters were ready. I mean, she'd had 100 reporters immediately in front of her after she was elected going, okay, what about the ET thing? What about this? What about that? All she had to do was hold them off for 70 days and take the White House. Yes, she was going to disclose. Only they know for sure. And I'm hoping one day they will talk about it. In fact, they're on the list to be interviewed for this documentary. I mean, it's down the line. But I desperately want to know, did you in fact intend to disclose? What was the plan? Right? And of course, then when she lost the election, everything blew up. Everything blew up. It was as if the ship basically took a torpedo under the waterline and sunk in about 20 minutes.
So you think presidents have access to information that the same deep level in intelligence has?
No. The presidents have been shut out on this in various degrees, including completely for some time. Clinton completely shut out. Obama completely shut out. Carter completely shut out. Trump definitely shut out. He's not been told anything. George W. Bush was shut out. But that's because he split from his father and his father's advisors. Might have been possible there, don't know. George H.W. Bush was fully informed. I don't think anybody would be surprised at that. Reagan, I think, was given some briefing, had some understanding. And by this, I mean understanding from the inside. There's plenty of information in the public domain. Even if you're a president, that doesn't mean you can't read Stan Friedman or Don Schmidt or any of 1,000 other books, right? Mm-hmm. But in terms of inside information, H.W. Bush certainly knew. Ford, no. Johnson, I don't think so. Nixon, I think, got some information. I think he got some briefings. And I think he knew. Whether he got a full briefing, I don't know. So as you can see, the presidents really have not been in the game on this since Eisenhower and Truman.
Mm-hmm. How true do you think the scenes in The Day the Earth Stood Still, the original one, of E.T. landing in D.C., how true do you think that would be? How do you see a disclosure? Let's just say they initiate contact more than, say, disclosure.
Well, there's two kinds of disclosure, Dan. Terrestrial and extraterrestrial. And one's better than the other. The ETs can land anytime they want. They can do anything they want. They could put on a show for us that would transfix us if we wanted to. But if they do that, they're going to scare the hell out of the human race. And they're going to undermine trust in government. They're going to create chaos. It's not going to be good. But it will be disclosure. And the governments, of course, will immediately follow and go, yeah, I guess we should have told you sooner. We don't want that. What we want is terrestrial disclosure. Now, that's when the governments do their job and tell their citizens the truth about this, long overdue. And we spend a year or two, I would say, getting used to it, getting up to speed, learning, studying, plenty of docs, movies. It'll be taught in the schools. About 2 years of that, we'll be totally bored with the subject because that's the way we are. And at that point, open contact makes sense. Open contact will not be disruptive. It will almost be anticlimactic. And so do we want an Earth stood still kind of scenario? No. Do we want an Independence Day scenario? No. We want to tell ourselves what we already know to be true. And then we'll see what the ETs do after that.
Of the humans on the Earth, let's just say we had to send a team to visit them. They've landed, let's say, so they're requesting somebody to come visit them to communicate with, who would those people be?
My hand will go up instantly.
I see that hand.
I mean, you know, if they Miss Bassett, we need some people to go and on a starship here and have a little diplomacy out there. I'm gone. I'm out. I'm gone. I'm gone. I'm packing my bag. Okay. If open contact took place, the idea of that kind of thing happening, which is what, of course, was the finale, the final scene in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, of course. Another great movie, fantastic movie, very positive movie, solid movie. I think that'll happen. And who gets chosen? Well, let's just say there'll be a lot of people wanting to go, and not too many will get the shot, but I expect that to happen.
Well, we definitely don't want a scenario like in the Twilight Zone where
No.
E.T. had been was taking people up and they had a book. They couldn't decipher what it was. Turned out it was a cookbook. I mean, and that sounds...
Everybody knows, Dan, that ETs are all vegetarians.
Okay, whoa. I didn't know, but that's good to know, man. I am really that. If I didn't learn anything, I'm glad to know that, because I don't want to end up in somebody's cookbook like that. But you know, it didn't end well for a lot of people there. But I mean, how could we trust them?
We can't, and we shouldn't. Well, you want to know something? In our own lives, we marry somebody, and we may be with them for 30 years, and yet we may never be able to fully trust them, because you can never be in another person's head. You can never be another person. Trust is hard to come by and hard to maintain, but extremely valuable. When you're talking about extraterrestrials, boy, no. You judge them on their actions. You better damn well judge them on the truth of their actions. In other words, not what some propagandist cooks up and tells you, but what they've really done. You are careful, you are wary, and you are prepared to respond if things start to get a little kinky. So trust, no. Is it appropriate to have a earned comfort level? I have that. I have an earned comfort level with the extraterrestrial presence, based upon what I know. And I know from a lot of different sources. I'm kind of comfortable with what's going on. Now, I'm not a contactee, but if I was a contactee of the hard kind, serious table work, maybe not a lot of not getting 4-star accommodations, I'm sure I'd feel a little different about that. But that's and appropriately so.
Wait.
But when I talk about a comfort level, I'm talking on a global scale. In other words, I'm saying on a global scale, speaking, if I were the human race, on a global scale, I have a comfort level with what's going on. And I think ultimately we will not be too upset with what we're going to learn post-disclosure and even post-open contact. And I wouldn't say that if that wasn't true. I'll tell you, if that all goes away, if I get information that tells me, oh my God, we're in deep trouble, I will publicly say so, because I'm not one that believes that the public can't handle the truth. I'm the person that believes it's the government that can't handle the truth. And if the public doesn't have the truth, nothing good will come from that.
Stephen, let me ask something. When you said one of those that hasn't had 4-star accommodation, I'm thinking an abductee who's been prodded in every orifice tube that there is with all sorts of hideous experiments. That's a little different than, say, a little less than 4-star accommodations. That's more like terrible horror.
I was trying to say it without getting into probes and stuff, but I think your listeners or viewers know what I was talking about.
Okay. Well, obviously, then you're right, though. They would definitely have a different opinion.
Absolutely.
So anyway, all right. Hey, we got this question from Curious out of Fast Blast. What do you know about NASA scientist Norma Berggren and the report of seeing aliens?
The name, I'm not going to Google it because it'll just kind of get goofy with us. The name is familiar. If she was a NASA astronaut, is that the one that there was one NASA astronaut apparently died, and there was some report they said they'd seen it. I can't speak to it specifically. I know that a lot of astronauts have it's been claimed that a lot of different astronauts have seen ETs.
Yeah.
That hasn't been proven to my satisfaction. Mm-hmm. There's also claims that a number of astronauts have seen UFOs. I believe some of them have. Certainly, Gordon Cooper saw something that very likely was an ET craft. Mm-hmm. But most of the claims are either wishful thinking or just someone trying to engage the issue and have a little fun. Because if there was real evidence out there that an astronaut had seen an extraterrestrial, I'd know about it. I say out there in the public domain, I would know about it. But what I have seen is not been convincing.
You know, when I had Edgar Mitchell on the show, and he was telling what he saw going out in space, and he said, and I asked him a question, sort of tongue in cheek. I said, when you were in the program, is it true that if you disclose something, they would wax you, they would take you out? And he said yes. But he said he didn't care now because he was at such an age that it didn't matter.
He actually said yes to that question?
He said yes to that question.
That's an interesting statement from him, and one that people should take seriously. One of the things about Edgar and about Gordon Cooper is that they never, everything they said about the ET issue, which is very important, and the media should have been all over them, right? But truth embargo, let it go. They never said anything that was directly related to their time at NASA. Right. That includes Edgar. In other words, the NASA astronauts, like most everybody else in the military intelligence complex, but I think an even higher degree, the NASA astronauts are under extreme non-disclosure. And so they could go out there, they could land on the moon, and the ETs could hold a party for them, and they're not going to say anything. And and not simply because of all the legalities of it, national security and all that, but the astronauts, they had a tremendous loyalty to NASA. Edgar, Gordon, even Glenn, they had the opportunity to make history and to go into space, and NASA gave that to them, and they were not going to say anything that would harm NASA. And if you study the astronauts, you will find they just don't do that. However, Edgar had information outside of his time at NASA, and he came forward with that. And so when he says, yeah, they would, probably what he's saying is they would be really unhappy and they would take significant measures. I don't think they'd kill an astronaut, but boy, they would sure make sure that whatever he said disappeared and nothing much happened. But let me say this. I do not know, and no one knows, and I don't think anybody really knows, the full extent of the measures the government has taken on this issue going back to 47. If people were killed, how many, how many threats, how many whatevers. I think there was some, but we don't know how much. But one thing's for sure, certainly during the Cold War, from 47 to 91, the ET issue was taken very seriously. And if you were somebody in there in the government, some guy at the Nellis Air Force range, and you want to let a video out of a craft being tested, which happened, or you wanted to talk about this, talk about that, you were in deep water. Well, they were very serious about it.
Well, you speculate that they wouldn't do such an act, but I still have questions about Gus Grissom's death and the other two astronauts. I mean, I still have a little question on that, thinking that was suspicious in my mind. How far are we away from disclosure?
Well, good question. As I say, we'd have had it by now if Clinton had won. And that is a nonpartisan disclosure advocate statement here. All right. She wins, we get it. She didn't, we didn't. Okay. Now, he's probably noticed a whole lot of people and institutions have been adjusting to some new realities in America since that election. And that adjustment's still going on. It's getting pretty intense. Tom DeLonge's people had to adjust. They had to make changes. I've had to readjust my thinking and strategies and everything else. I think it's notable that To the Stars Academy wasn't announced until October of 2017. They waited 10 months into the year before they made a move. They easily could have waited until after the midterms. They could have waited a long time. But I think they made a decision. They still had to go forward, even though there was political chaos in America. And I assure you that making an announcement of this magnitude in the middle of political chaos is not a good idea. All right. However, they did. And I think that there's more to come, but they're taking their time. In fact, in the last 2 months since that announcement, boy, things have gotten wilder and wilder. And I think they have literally stepped back saying, we need to wait until things calm down. So it may be a little while before they next move, but they have more moves, I assure you. And if they continue to bring the information out as they already have, I don't see disclosure. I don't think the truth embargo rather lasting much longer, maybe into early next year. But certain political things are going to have to take place. One of the most important, politically, one of the most important things that could impact the speed of the soft disclosure process, ultimately leading to hard disclosure, is the fate of the president. If he is out of office, say within the next few months, that changes a lot. And it increases the prospects that things are going to pick up again. But then there's obviously going to be some serious matters taking place in terms of the administrative changes. And there's going to be things in Congress going on. If he's still the president as of the midterms, things are going to get really intense because the Democrats are going to take the House, which means they can start impeachment process immediately. And so that will delay it. So really the fate of Donald Trump right now is very much tied to what could take place on the disclosure front. Now, it doesn't stop me from doing things, but it makes it harder for me to get attention in the media, right? Yeah. But it definitely impacts Tom DeLonge's To the Stars Academy team. Because let me point out something very important. We learned from an interview that one of the team members, CIA careerist Jim, Semivan, he gave an interview to a colleague, Melinda Leslie. A lengthy interview took place. And in that interview, a number of things were exchanged, a number of information was exchanged. And one of the things that she learned that she has passed on, which has not been refuted at this point, he informed her that behind this 10-person team on the To the Stars Academy, inside the military intelligence complex, is 40 or 50 other people backing it up. Mm-hmm. In other words, they just didn't pop out like some rogue group. There's 40 or 50 people behind them. And so you can imagine as they're trying to calculate and the issues they're facing, because there are plenty of people inside the military intelligence complex that don't want this to happen. They have opposition. And so the political arena is affecting them. It's a very complex process. Mm-hmm. And so all I can say is we're going to have to see how things go.
Well, let me ask something, Stephen Bassett. People speculated that earlier when we shot missiles in Syria, they were saying, hey, man, that's a wag the dog situation. Could disclosure work for Donald Trump in a wag the dog situation?
No.
I mean, wouldn't that overtake all other news cycles?
Well, let's put it this way. On a scale of 1 to 100, a scale of wag the dog effectiveness, meaning this approach versus that approach. Mm-hmm. Launching missiles And I'm not saying that that's what it was.
Right.
I actually, if there is a wag the dog there, it is, in terms of the missile launch, well, the wag, okay, I'm getting confused here. Okay, look, there may have been some dog wagging on that missile launch, but it didn't have anything to do with disclosure. Now, in terms of using that approach on disclosure,
right.
On a scale of 1 to 100, the complexity, wag the dog effectiveness of launching missiles is right up there, 90. It's easy, it's straightforward, it works. On using disclosure to wag the dog, the degree of difficulty would be exponentially higher and far more difficult. And so I would not recommend anybody play that, wag the dog with that one, because it will just literally get completely out of control from them, and nothing good will come from it.
As far as I can see, nothing's good come from much anyway. So why not throw that up in there? So you mentioned a truth embargo. Who is running the embargo?
The truth embargo essentially is a term that we apply, we use. I'm pretty much mostly responsible for that term getting some life. It used to be called the UFO cover-up for decades. That's what it was called, UFO cover-up. But it's not a cover-up, and it's not about UFOs. Truth embargo is the term that we use to describe the government's policy of withholding the ET reality, right, from us. So they're not going to call it a truth embargo. They're going to call it a national security directive or national security policy, that this information is classified and remains classified, and that because the ETs come and go, and there's plenty of interaction going on out there, and the media is involved to some degree, they've extended that policy to include interference, manipulation. Nothing surprising about that. And in other words, the truth issue on the ET is not like hiding some secret bomber program where you got a hangar somewhere, nobody knows about it, and they got people in there under classification. That bomber, the ETs are not a secret bomber. They're flying around doing whatever the hell they want. And so trying to keep that a secret, you can't keep it a secret. All you can do is manage it. Though you can keep secret the research and other things you're doing, but the truth of the matter is actually out in the open. And so they had to manage it. And all of those efforts, the classifications, the management, any interference with the press, all of that I've lumped together to call it truth embargo, because basically what they're saying is, like the island of Cuba, it's embargoed, you can't go there. And as far as the ET presence information and information, it's embargoed, we don't want you to go there. Mm-hmm. So that's why I describe it that way. Who runs it? It is endemic to the system, and it's run from the national security state. And those that need to know about it, and those that don't. It's compartmentalized, all the usual stuff.
Sound like part of the deep state. Hey, this question comes from YouTube from Miss Freedom. Is the TR-3B craft a government back-engineered craft?
That is the consensus. Most of the researchers believe that TR-3B, if it exists, and there's a lot of information about it, is re-engineered from ET technology. It is, and I believe there's other ET technology-derived craft. We call them alien reproduction vehicles. Mm-hmm. Some speculate they may have actually fixed a crashed ET saucer or something and got it to run. Don't know. And
God,
not surprisingly, that would be cool. Not surprisingly, I think the re-engineering efforts, or back engineering efforts, in the early days were very crude, and over time they got better and they got better. There's instances where people have had encounters with, quote, UFOs, really close. And they got radiation, burns and other phenomena. And I don't think the ET craft do that. I think this was human engineered craft. They were just, put together. So to some degree, I think it's fair to say that if you see a truly anomalous, unidentified air phenomena, a UAP rather, there's a decent possibility it's a human craft. We don't know how many anti-gravitic craft have been made by the United States. It could be 1, it could be 50, it could be 500. We don't know. But we know one thing, they were going to do it. Mm-hmm. Anybody that says, oh no, they would have just put that that crashed vehicle in an underground somewhere and never touched it. Oh, God, no. They're going to study every molecule of that craft. And if they can build an anti-gravity craft, they were going to build it. And if they can build a better one, they're going to do that. If they can build 100, they're going to do that. That is pure common sense. Now, the question is, what have they got? And I think they've got anti-gravity craft. The real question, the most important question in all of this, as far as I'm concerned, from the standpoint of the fate of the human race, is what do they know about the energy systems that drive, that feed that propulsion system? What do they know, and have they studied it and perfected it? Do they have ET-based energy systems? And if they do, are they keeping them from us? Because if they are, they have a big public relations problem one day. But we have got to have that technology. We can't have it too soon.
I've heard people say that they hope that we have reversed alien technology for weapons systems should the United States get into war. I don't know about that. But Stephen Bassett, what is going on the South Pole?
A lot of mythology. The South Pole has always intrigued people. Antarctic, we're interested in it. Everybody's interested in it. We have bases down there. Many countries have had bases down there. It's possible the Nazis had an interest, may have sent some subs down, whatever. But the combination of the intrigue of Antarctica plus our fascination with Nazis, which we simply can't give up, a whole lot of mythology is built up about it, fed by a book, a very good book written by a guy named Harbison called Genesis, which is a real rip-roaring tale about UFOs and Nazis and Antarctica. I don't have a lot of confidence in the theories that are being tossed around, frankly. I'm not investing any effort in it. If it turns out there's a Nazi base down there with UFOs, I guess I'll have to say, gee, I should have paid more attention. Now, could there be a alien base down there? You betcha. Aliens could put a base anywhere they want to. I mean, they got a lot of cool technology under mountains, under the ocean, and they could be down there. But to me, that would be no more exotic than if they've got one under a mountain in the state of Oregon. But it's kind of exotic, and people like to get into it. But I don't have much invested in it at this point.
When you get into internet shows like this, you're going to have people on that talk about space wars and various things. Is there any evidence that the United States has any ship that can leave this atmosphere?
Oh, I think so. Absolutely. Well, we know we have. What you mean? We have rockets that leave our atmosphere all the time. You're saying that we have anti-gravity craft that can leave our atmosphere.
Right. And more to the point of interplanetary travel.
Again, I think the anti-gravity craft are capable of interplanetary travel. Saucers, I think. What a much more difficult question to answer is: do we have ET-derived interstellar technology? I don't think so, and it's an Occam's razor thing. Basic logic says that these small craft that we see, small saucers, 40, 60, 70 feet, they don't have interstellar capability. But there's the motherships, and you've heard about the motherships, which don't appear often. Occasionally there have been some sightings, but they don't. They're big, really big. And I think the theory is that most of the ET craft that are flying around doing their business here either operate from a base on our planet or they operate from those ships. But if they're going to go interstellar, if those saucers are going to be taken back to a home planet, they're going to get into another ship, and that has the interstellar drive.
Do you think that
these are theories? These are just speculations. Don't know for sure.
Do you think that the Stephenville sighting was a mothership?
No.
Because weren't there some estimates of it being a mile long?
No. The Stephenville craft was more of a standard saucer. However, the black triangle sightings do get large. The Stephenville craft was not a black triangle. I'm pretty sure it was a standard craft, maybe 40, 60 feet. Boom, it goes by. Whoop, the jets come by. But look, there have been huge triangles seen, mile across. Number of sightings of these. much bigger than the TR-3Bs, obviously. And you got to wonder about those. They could be interstellar craft. They also could be human craft. One of the things that I thought, again, I'm just spitballing now, okay?
Okay, sure, go ahead.
But let's say it's 1940s, 50s, and you've got a number of crashed ET saucer types, and it's got anti-gravitic propulsion technology, and you kind of figure out how to use it. That doesn't mean you can make a saucer. Those saucers are pretty cool. The descriptions tend to show them as being made out of single construction, no seams, things like that. And so the idea you could take the concept of anti-gravitic technology, create your own anti-gravitic drive, and then build a saucer. No. So you'd have to build a craft that you could fit it in. You'd have to come up with something that would at least do the job. And so this idea that humans go, okay, look, well, we can't do a saucer, but we'll build these triangles and we'll put one thing, whatever, would make sense. Meaning, okay, this is the human version. This is what we got to work with. Now, once you've got anti-gravitics, well, you can build those craft as big as you want. You can make them 2 miles wide if you want to, if you got enough anti-gravitic engines in there. And so it's not out of the question that all of the black triangles, no matter how big they are human anti-gravitic craft designed in triangle form. But maybe not. Again, I'm dying to get the scoop on that, and I hope post-disclosure we're going to find that out.
Yeah. When you said sort of your standard saucer, I was thinking, man, if I get one, I'm going to want one with leather seats and cruise control. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm going to want all the interstellar upgrades I can get. Stephen Bassett of the executive director of Paradigm Research Group. Tell us what the folks can find on your website.
Well, let me tell you what's coming up, okay? Because I think we're pretty short on time, right?
Yes.
First of all, I am proud to announce that after 12 years, I have finally made it on Ancient Aliens. I'm going to be one of the alumni. There is a 2-hour season premiere coming up April 27 in 6 days.
Wow.
Or 7 days.
Okay.
And 6 days.
Okay.
And it's going to have a heavy emphasis on disclosure. Big deal. I think I'm all over this puppy. And so I invite people to watch History Channel, Ancient Aliens. So I'm proud of that. I'm going to be speaking at the Contact in the Desert conference, which is like their fourth one. They may have 1,500, 2,000 people there. It's going to be held at a fancy resort this time, not out at the Joshua Tree in the hot desert, but at the Indian Wells Resort east of Palm Springs. Super deluxe accommodations. So that's a big deal. That's coming up. I'm also speaking this next weekend down at the New Living Expo in San Mateo. I think I'm in there on Friday and Saturday. I'm going to be speaking at what's the other big one? The Architects of the New Paradigm Conference up in Canada. Are you based in Canada, Dan?
No,
are you or not? No.
Indianapolis.
Okay. I'm going to be speaking in Vancouver on June 30th, Architects of the New Paradigm. So all of these conferences are on my website, paradigmresearchgroup.org. You can see all the speaking engagements. And also I have a conference. All conferences are listed there for people who want to see what's coming up. That's in the upcoming conference section and tons of other stuff. So I've got and I'm already booked this year, 16 conferences, most ever. And that's because of Tom DeLonge and what they did. I mean, everybody's fired up. They're excited. Alien Con. Alien Con is June 15 to 17. Now, that's the event that's tied into Ancient Aliens, that's backed up by the A&E channel and History Channel. They had something like 18,000 people at the last one. This one is June 15 to 17, Pasadena Convention Center. They're going to be 20,000 people at that puppy, and I'm going to be speaking there too.
Look at you.
So it's my year. By the way, Dan, I was born in the Chinese Year of the Dog, 1946.
Okay.
And this is also the Year of the Dog.
Okay.
My name is Bassett. So let me tell you, Dan, this is my year.
That's synchronicity right there.
You betcha. That's powerful synchronicity, my friend.
Wow. Hey, man, if you're hanging out with Giorgio Tullio, grab that pen, man, his alien pen, and mail it to me, will you?
Yeah, I'm sure. I have to get through his bodyguards first.
Well, congratulations to you, Stephen. Man, what a lineup, man! This is your year.
Yeah, and I enjoyed the show. Dan, this is one of the best interviews I've ever done, and I've done over 1,000. You just asked great questions. Uh, I just really enjoyed this interview. We got to do this again.
Hey, no problem, man. I'll get you on the schedule, and we'll do this again. Especially if you get some of these seminars that you're going to do. I want to hear how that went. Stephen Bassett, I appreciate you coming on the Edge Television broadcast.
My pleasure, sir.
All right, good evening.